leading versus managing. Oh, I'm going to be a leader. Don't manage, lead. Well, okay, let me just kind of provide a clarification. If you can't manage, you can't lead. They both are skill sets. They're a little bit different, except for the fact that if you fumble, bumble, mumble on all the different aspects of managing, you will never rise to be a leader. You have to be able to do both. Now, a lot of people, they're very good managers, but they don't have the vision, the clarity, the big conceptual picture of what it is about leading. And then every time you sit down with a meeting and a group of people, you would need to sit down and be projecting them 3, 4, and 5 years in the future of what things can become and trying to unite them. That probably is the major difference between managing and leading. Managing, you're working on the regular operational level and not looking on the big picture or moving to the big picture. That's what probably the biggest difference is. But let's go through and let's talk about some of the different aspects of it, how to go about leading. What's the difference? Can you be both a manager and a leader? Yes, duh. Okay, and what are some influence tactics as well as tactics influence the outcomes in the process? Being a manager means planning, organizing, directing, controlling. Yeah, that's what it is. That's the function of management. You have to be able to do all four. Being a leader means to be visionary. You know what? That's cute. Might be a nice title for a book. Being visionary, except you have to do both. A leader is your visionary and you're applying the four bases of planning, organizing, directing, controlling, because that's how you run an organization. You have to do both to be a leader. Now, that being said, can you be a manager and work up to being a leader? Yes, because normally we don't think that being a leader is something genetic, although there are some people that do have a genetic predisposition to sit down and be big picture and strategic as part of their actual genes. Seriously, that's what it comes down to, especially if you dive into the relevant data and the research that's involved with strength finders and that aspect with Gallup. So you're looking at the different aspects of what it means. Managing resources, managing people. Just, part of my wiring is the fact that I really don't trust technology very much. I trust people because if the technology doesn't work, I'm going to go find a person that knows about it to help me make the technology work. I trust human beings far more than I trust technology, because technology on a good day is sociopathic and has no moral code, no ethics, no compass or anything else, where people tend to do that. The technology is not loyal or faithful, while people can be that process. So you want to look at the different things. Being conscientious, being inspirational, yes, yes, yes. Executing plans as a manager and delivering goods and services. Being inspiring. Oh, you delivered that package wonderfully. I cannot believe you are the best package deliverer I have ever seen. That really is kind of hokey, isn't it? But if you take all this different gobbledygook, you're saying the difference between the two, you need to be able to manage, and you also need to be able to inspire. You need to be able to instill confidence. You need to sit down and be the one that when there's a crisis out there, they're saying, no, they're in that chair. It'll be okay. If you can inspire that much, if you can act decisively, put people first, respond to them, and act for the followers. You need to be the mouthpiece. You need to be the one that listens to the followers. If you don't, you can never be a leader. Leaders listen, they inspire, they get it, they understand human beings, they sit down there and they paint a picture and they start developing a shared vision, and by doing that, they might have their own vision, and then, I like what you had to say over there, and then they have 2 or 3 words they grab from this person and they add it to the vision, and now the vision is bigger, and then they hear this. They hear that from that person over there and that over here. They start creating a shared vision, and every single time they add something to it, more people march on board, and they tend to march forward in lockstep in the aspect of being missionaries of the vision of the leader. That's part of being a referent leader, using that whole aspect from the 5 different powers, the referent leader, because you're inspiring, because you're gathering up the people to sit down and share your vision in the process. Managerial leadership includes influencing followers. You're always committing to a set of shared goals. Did you get that shared part of it? And also, by managers exercise leadership on a daily basis. You want to be rational. You want to have inspirational appeals. We can do this, but we have to listen to each other. Come on, let's get to work. Sometimes you have to roll your sleeves up, and sometimes you got to work 12 and 14 hours. Let's sit down and talk about work-life balance. Work-life balance, well, I want to go home at 4:30 because my kid's playing baseball. That might happen sometimes, except the reality is sometimes there is a thing called sacrifice, and if you're sitting in the chair of a leader, that sacrifice needs to sit down and shine through, because you can't expect the person next to you to sacrifice if you aren't doing the same thing. Now, you can always have time off later, but sometimes in a moment of crisis, you need to be the one that they turn to with a sense of confidence that you're there in that aspect of it. Some of the influences rely on the core: be authentic. If you're tired and exhausted, sometimes you can say that. Consult rather than be legitimate in that aspect of it. Ingratiation, groveling because of the fact somebody's doing something. Sometimes you should expect it, be subtle, and learn to influence. Bump, just a little comment. Is that what you really want to do? Do you think that's the best way we can handle that? I kind of have a different vision for that. What else can you come up with? Sometimes you're talking and you're prodding. You want to sit down and be as positive as you can. And then if you have some kind of negative aspect of it, you want to bounce it out. I make a big to-do about writing memos. I require everybody, when I teach business communications, to write a memo. I want a memo sandwich. Positive, you always say something good. Okay, even in a negative memo, at least it's neutral over here, and then you deliver the message in the middle, and then you close out in the positive too. You know, I appreciate your 15 years of service over here, but we have to make some changes. And the changes are going to require you to actually sit down and be transferred to another department. I'm going to keep the same salary for now, but the reality is things are going to change because we have to make some changes in the organization. I'm looking forward to you sitting there being as dedicated in this new role as you have been in the past. Thank you very much. Positive, negative, positive. You always want to sit down and start working that in on a regular basis, being uplifting even when you have to sit down and do something negative in the process. The positive oriented task, the intelligence, being that extroversion. You don't want to be a narcissist. We have too many of them walking planet Earth, and I don't know about you, some of that stuff is really pretty ugly. Machiavellian. I have dealt with that. I'm in higher education, and just, Machiavelli is alive and well. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you want to get the book called The Prince, written by Machiavelli, and read about the dark, subtle secrets of how to manipulate people nonstop, and also, if necessary, stab them in the back with somebody else in the whole thing. I recommend it's good reading, and maybe not for you to use it, but for you to be aware that there's some people that do use it on a regular basis, called The Prince by Machiavelli. It was written by Machiavelli so you could help an aspiring king sit down there and become a ruler and use the tools of the trade to make certain that he destroys his enemies and rewards his loyalists. So that being said, make sure you have that. Use emotional intelligence. Don't sit down there and use some aspect of trying to sit down and be infantile in the aspect of your leadership. Be the intelligent one that people turn to for stability. That's a big trait of leaders. They're stable. They don't let things rattle them. I remember sitting one time, we had a crisis happening out over there, and somebody made the comment, says, you realize people are depending on us. I said, yes, they do. The reality is that they depend on us. We don't know what the hell we're doing. So that being said, we all chuckled and everything else, and we worked through the problem. The reality of it really came down to the fact that sometimes people will look to you in the darkest moments, and you better be ready to sit down and say something inspirational, something that they can all relate to, because that is what the aspect is, and your role as leader. Have the ability to identify problems. Remember, I told you before, the hardest part of identifying a problem is identifying the problem and getting an agreement as to what it is. You can't solve all the other ones until you identify what you're supposed to be solving. Have that interpersonal skills and persuade others. Business skills, conceptual skills, big picture skills, because whatever you solve here is going to be out there 3 years from now, and if you solve it wrong, you're going to have a bump in the road. You have to go back and fix it again. Make certain when you solve it that you're out there. You create a vision that others share, delegate, follow through, and here's a big thing, and the book doesn't talk about it because the author probably didn't sit in the chair of serious leadership. Keep your word. That's a big deal. When you give your word, you follow through, you do what you say you're going to do. If you can't do it because something else happens, you go back to the people that you promised you do it and tell them why. And then if you got to face the wrath of them, so be it. But keep your word. They should be able to trust it that when you say something, you mean it. That's part of being a leader, and it's also part of leading versus managing. Take care.